Regiment of Renown Unit Pack 1 has arrived, bringing a melee infantry to every faction. We're going to see what they're good for and whether they fill a hole in the faction's roster. So let's go. Kicking it off with the DUNE Dragons for Cathay. These are Celestial Dragon Guards, so anti-large elite infantry. With stat improvements, magical attacks, spell resistance and an immunity to psychology, they are a demon killer. Preferably taking on demons of the large variety, single entities, monstrous infantry, even cavalry, they're going to do exceptionally well against. Why? Because demons have a physical resistance, which protects them from 20% of all physical attacks, unless the unit attacking them has magical attacks, as the DUNE Dragons do. On top of that, they have an immunity to psychology, which means they won't be scared by fear or terror, something that is common in the demons. So through and through, demon hunters, they've got all the tools to get the job done. They're going to be a great killer of those units, but also just a good deterrent. If there's a bloodthirster on the right side of your army, you send these over to the right side of your army and it scares it off at least, so it can keep the bloodthirster in check, making it constantly move if they can't keep a hold of it. It's going to help Cathay a little bit as a faction, giving it something that can deal with all those strong single entities, but isn't a huge game changer for them, as Cathay tends to struggle because of the mechanics of the game and how their faction works, rather than a lack of units or tools. Next up for the cornflakes, it's the Hellforged host, Exalted Bloodletters, who are considerably juiced up. They have double the armor, but it's still only 60, which isn't a huge amount. They got some nice stat improvements though, and Hungering Blades, which gives them more damage after 40 kills rather than the 80 that Hellblade would normally make them wait for. Overall, they're basically the same as the Exalted Bloodletters in their role and in their performance. They are huge damage dealers, infantry killers. They're just a little bit better at the job than the regular unit and can just get damage done quicker. The extra armor might protect them from missiles a little bit better, but not that much. Their best use is probably going to be if you want to burn a hole in the enemy frontline very quickly. This will be the unit to do that, especially if you buff them up with any support from the Blood Shrine or a Herald. Likely the strongest unit in the game in an infantry on infantry fight. For the faction of Khorne, they don't really bring anything new or anything that's going to make the faction better. They pretty much already had this in the normal Exalted Bloodletters and every other damage dealer in the army. They can just do damage a little bit faster with the fact that they only need 40 kills to activate their damage boost. So nothing uniquely useful for Khorne with this unit, but still always nice to have, right? On to Kislev and DAZH'S HEARTH-BLADES. These are Sargard with great weapons with a fiery twist. So basically the same with some stat improvements and fire attacks on their melee, as well as a 20% fire resistance and an ability to restore their vigor. So this unit is a nice addition for Kislev, as their army did generally lack fire attacks. There weren't many units that had it, so if there was regenerating units, they couldn't really capitalize on the weakness to fire that regenerating units have. In Warhammer 3, we don't have a ton of regenerating units. We've got the Beast of Nurgle here, for example. There are a few others, but these boys will really shine when the Warhammer 2 units arrive to the game, with the Undead and all the other factions regenerating units that are weak to fire. The Hearthblades will have way more to do. Also, having that fire resistance means that they'll take 20% less damage from anything else that has flaming attacks, which could be Bloodletters, or a lot of the missiles from DAZH'S faction have fire attacks on it, so they'll be taking 20% less damage from all of those units. And then they also have the one-time use Vigor buff, which is going to give them some killing power back. Could be useful at the right moment when you engage with a regenerating unit, especially if it's late in the battle. The slightly awkward part to the situation though is that they have a bonus versus infantry, so you should really use them against infantry. Here they're fighting two monsters and they're able to beat these two monsters, even though technically they do cost more than them. And a lot of regenerating units are monsters, so it kind of puts them in a bit of an awkward spot, but still, they can be relatively effective against those large stuffs with their fiery damage. So a nice addition for Kislev, fills a little bit of a hole that they had with a lack of fire attacks. Now to old Papa Nurgo with the Festering Stooges, Exalted Plague Bearers, with of course some stat improvement. They also have Gloom of Flies, which is the same as Cloud of Flies with the +9 melee defense, except it causes terror as well, so they can cause terror. And they have Regeneration, which can resurrect models as well, so they are super tanky. They still have their missile attack just like the normal Exalted Plague Bearers, which is also a little bit stronger. Ultimately, they are just the same as the Exalted Plague Bearers really, in their role at least. They're tanky, they hold well, they can probably be a little bit more of a damage dealer than the regular version, but not by much. Their regeneration of course helps keep them alive, but only when they're fighting in melee, and the unit can resurrect models once the healing is done, which can be difficult against higher tier units like these Exalted Bloodletters, who will make it very hard to keep your health high. so they may be able to make better use of that fighting lower tier infantry that won't take all their health away quickly and will allow them to heal and potentially resurrect models. Either way, they're not really filling any of the holes in Nurgle's roster that need filling. They're pretty much just Exalted Plague Bearers, just better at the job. They'll last a lot longer and be very difficult to get rid of for the enemy. So a very strong unit to add to the Nurgle roster, but not one that's going to make a huge difference to their playstyle or give them any tools that they so desperately need. For the Ogres, the Powder Guts, man-eater ogre pistols that are basically the same, just with a superior ranged attack for the most part, longer range, better accuracy, faster fire rate, although a nice ability that does buff them up if they are losing in combat. So very much the same role as the regular ogre pistols, which did get a bit of a nerf in this recent patch. Ideally, to get the most out of them, you want to use all their ammo before you get them into melee, lest you lose a model and lose the ammo. As they do have that extra range, a faster fire rate, and more accuracy, they'll be able to do more damage more quickly. Once the ammo's depleted, they're going to be good in melee pretty much anywhere. Obviously, infantry is probably the best target, but they can take on some large stuff as well. A very well-rounded, versatile unit that can get a lot done. They do have that adaptive tactics ability as well, which will buff them up if they start to lose in melee, just adding to their toughness. So a really nice unit for the Ogres, although not adding anything new. They already had pretty strong ranged options. Even the regular Ogre pistols are damn good, not to mention lead belchers and artillery. So not really adding anything that the Ogres didn't already have, but a nice unit to play with all the same. On to Slaanesh and the Bringers of Beguilement. These are exalted demonettes that have perfect vigor so they don't get tired and lose damage output as the battle wears on, and they can cause rampage, much like the Witch Elves. So overall, another unit that really just has the same role. It's just a straight-up infantry killer. They've still got devastating flanker, so they want to try and get behind enemies, ideally. And that perfect vigor really comes into play as a battle wears on, where other units will start to lose their effectiveness and their damage output and everything else that comes with being fatigued and tired. They won't have that problem. They'll be at max strength, max damage, power, all the way through the battle, which honestly is one of the most powerful attributes in the game for a unit to have perfect vigor and to have that constant damage output. And of course, the rampage as well will make the enemy lose control of one of their units for a short time. This can be another incredibly powerful ability, especially if you can keep a strong unit in a bad situation and quickly take them out. It can be an absolute game changer. So some really nice possibilities with this unit, but again, nothing terribly new for the faction. They already had some great infantry killing tools, now they've just got an extra one. The Rampage could be useful for helping you take control of powerful large units or lords. You can run over and just touch them to rampage them when their health is low enough and then run away again, because it's not a great fight for them to be taking on monsters, but that Rampage could just keep an enemy unit in a bad situation long enough for you to take it out. And lastly, the Blazing Squealers for the faction of DAZH'S Exalted Pink Horrors. They have Warp Flame on their ranged attack, a few stat improvements, obviously, but most usefully, they can replenish the ammunition of nearby friendly units. So the same kind of usage as the regular Pink Horrors, use up all that ranged ammo first, then chuck them into melee, because they're not fantastic in melee. They're better than regular Pink Horrors, but not by much. Certainly not going to take down Exalted Bloodletters anyway, not unless they can kite them and blast them to crap with the missiles first, because that light armor of Bloodletters would be susceptible to their non-armor piercing missile, which, as I say, does have Warp Flame, so it'll weaken armor, it'll give a weakness to fire, which is not only going to help their missile do more damage, but other units as well, so it'll weaken all kinds of units, but especially regenerating units, of course, that are already weak to fire. You can bring them an even bigger weakness to fire and reduce their armor and do a lot of damage with their missiles. Their biggest selling point, though, is the fact that they can replenish the ammunition of nearby friendly units, because all that extra ammo means more potential damage output, and that is just incredibly powerful. It's only one-time use, but these are going to be a good little staple to lead your ranged force. So overall, going to be best off working with other Pink Horrors so that they can give that weakness to fire, making the normal Pink Horrors missiles stronger and replenish their ammo, which seems like they're just going to make DAZH'S faction even stronger. So that's all the new units in Regiment of Renown Pack 1. A few nice additions to fill a couple of holes in a few factions' rosters, but otherwise, a lot of the units are just nice to have and not really necessary for the faction, but nice to see the factions get filled out just that little bit more as time goes on. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the future.